Hello and welcome to the On the Couch podcast, the podcast that gives you the view from the therapist chair. I'm your host, John Dennis, a licensed professional counselor. You're listening to OTC episode 70 with Dan and Kristin Naylor of the Remember Shop. Welcome back again, OTC listeners. Well, it is officially fall now, so pumpkin spice is raining from the heavens, and yeah, it's getting cooler out there. A lot of fall sports are in swing. This episode, I'm sharing a conversation that I had with my good friends Dan and Kristin Naylor, and I wanted to reach out to them because I know that they were touched personally by Stillbirth, and wanted to reach out to have them share their story, because I know that for a lot of these things, a lot of just life experiences, when things really get rough, a lot of times we look around and we want to gather information and understand what's happened, and that's very normal for us to want to understand, like, what is this that I'm going through? And for so many people, often there's that feeling of like, why aren't other people talking about this? Why is it I'm just learning about this now? Or, does this happen to other people? And why am I, just finding out about it now as I'm going through it? And I know that was something that they felt in their journey of, really, really becoming aware of how significant stillbirths are in America and throughout the globe. And then them trying to, make sense of that and walk through that, and just all of their experiences with loved ones and friends and their support circle, and then taking that and doing something with it through the Remember Shop. And if you look on Etsy at the Remember Shop, you'll find Kristin Naylor's shop, and the orbs that they create. And they've also branched out into a number of other things since I spoke with them originally. But just trying to do something to commemorate that life. And again, it's something that we often don't know is out there until it hits us. And they shared that they had gotten connected to the Star Legacy Foundation. And so I kind of wanted to just share a little bit of information before jumping to the interview in terms of stillbirths and what is that. So a stillbirth is the death of a baby before the moment of birth. So in most states in the US, babies who die before 20 weeks of gestation are classified as miscarriages, and babies who die at 20 weeks gestation or later are classified as stillbirths. And in the US, nearly 24,000 babies are stillborn every year. And worldwide, there are more than 2.6 million stillbirths every year. So in the US, the stillbirth rate it's 5.9 per 1,000 live births. So that means 1 out of every 180 deliveries ends in stillbirth. And again, when just all of the emotions, all of the physical toll that takes, is just unbelievable. And you go through this mixture of emotions of joy and happiness and expectation and getting everything ready, and then it turns all of a sudden, and it's exhaustion and it's sadness and anger and denial and confusion and feeling as though you're, you've been betrayed, and then all of the aftermath of how other people respond to that and or don't respond to that. And that's why I wanted to reach out to Dan and Kristin and share their story, because I know that through the couples work that I do and the individual work that I do, that I've walked with so many people that have struggled with fertility and miscarriages and stillbirths, and often their support system is lacking, either through just lack of knowledge or experience in their own lives, sometimes just wanting to help and, not knowing how to do that, or saying the wrong thing. And often couples or individuals that are dealing with this feel so alone. And that's some of where Dan and Kristin come in, and the Star Legacy Foundation and other organizations that are centered around this cause. If this is something that you are going through, or you have a loved one or family member that's going through this, reaching out to Dan and Kristin, or reaching out to the Star Legacy Foundation or another organization in your area to make yourself aware and to reach out for support. It's so vital that, this is one of the hardest things a person can ever go through. And that's when we need the support the most. Again, as always, I hope you take something from this. So I'm thrilled to be joined tonight on the Couch podcast by the lovely, the talented, the ever creative Kristin and Dan Naylor. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. I'm so glad we were able to put this together. So thank you for being able to carve out some time. With today's conversation, just wanting to kind of unpack, you're connected to the Star Legacy Foundation, and if you can just sort of explain what is that and how did you get connected to it?
Sure. So, the Star Legacy Foundation is really the nation's kind of leading stillbirth research, education, advocacy 501c3. So there are other organizations doing similar work, but Star Legacy is the one that's kind of really honed in on stillbirth. So with other organizations, we see a lot of funding poured into prematurity and even SIDS, which is rightfully so, and they're seeing a lot of improvement there. But of course, with our story, we were really excited about that. Star Legacy is doing such amazing work with specifically towards stillbirth. So the mission is to increase education, support research, promote education, encourage advocacy and family support regarding stillbirth, pregnancy loss, and neonatal death. So, it was one of the resources that I kind of started stalking online after Abby died. And what I was seeing, I was just so impressed with what they're doing and how they're going about it. And I started realizing they have a cool model where there's chapters. They have kind of chapters based all around the nation. So that right now there's 26 chapters around the country. And as of October, there wasn't one here in Philadelphia. So, so I pulled a team together and we submitted our application. And so here we are. We're ready for action.
Wow. Okay. So you jumped in, boots on the ground. Okay.
Yeah.
Kristin doesn't know how not to jump in, both boots on the ground.
Well,
she's a passion-driven person.
Okay. So, you mentioned Abby briefly. Are you comfortable sharing your story and your connection to this?
Yes. So we have 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
We have 2. Our boys are 3 and 4.5. And
Had to do the math there.
yes,
Yeah.
right.
Thank you for not going with the months, like
Yes.
48 and
right. And so Abby is our 3rd child. We were kind of always on the fence about if we wanted a 3rd child or not. And so because when she was born, we would have had 3 kids, like under 3.5, and just that whole journey, just sounded terrifying.
Yeah. Wow.
But after we got pregnant and once we found out that she was a girl, it was like, it really changed it for us. It was this pregnancy full of expectation, and it just felt so different that this time, like adding a baby sister to the family, and just the dynamic of a little girl and all the things that we both imagined doing with our daughter. All that was just really kind of at the forefront of the pregnancy, and so we were kind of we were excited. And in terms of the pregnancy, it really was pretty smooth pregnancy. I mean, I don't feel well during pregnancy, but medically speaking, there were
everything checked out.
Yeah, no huge concerns. And so when I was 38 weeks pregnant, I had a high blood pressure reading at home. And so I called my nurse and we went into the hospital, and of course my blood pressure never spiked while we were there. They gave me a couple of bags of fluid and monitored Abby and myself and sent us home.
Yeah. To back up, the reason why it was such a concern is that actually our first child, Isaac, who's 4.5 now, was 31-week preemie.
Okay.
And it was an emergency C-section because of high blood pressure. So
you'd kind of been through that a little bit before, and it was kind of on the radar.
Exactly. Almost daily we were checking it just to make sure that the numbers were staying consistent. So when the numbers went up, we internally panic a bit.
Sure. So sorry, you were saying, they kind of checked you out, monitored, gave you some fluids, and were like, all right, looks good, sending you home.
Send us home. Yep. And so it was 1 week. 1 week later, at 39 weeks, I was just in at the OB for my last visit before we had a planned C-section 4 days later. And, basically I knew that her movements had changed, but it wasn't enough that I was concerned enough to call.
Sure.
That it was just that whole slowing down. I'm basically huge, and so is she. And so as we're in there, the medical student came over to try to find her heartbeat, and she couldn't find it, which they always find it right away. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm trying not to freak myself out too much. I'm like, it's just a medical student. I'm sure she doesn't know what she's doing. Sure. Just to give myself a line. And so soon enough, the doctor came over and he's doing the same thing. It felt like forever. They're like trying, moving the Doppler all around, trying to find the heartbeat. And he said, I'm going to stop torturing you. Let's go around the corner to the ultrasound. They had an ultrasound machine in the office.
Okay.
And so we went around the corner and all these people came in the room, and I'm just like laying on the table and had my hand over my face because I just didn't want to look up at their faces as they're like staring at the screen and watching me. And so finally he's just like, I'm so sorry. There's no heartbeat.
Wow. So, I mean, just the floor kind of drops out from under you, I would imagine, where you're just, turned upside down.
In every way. It's so unbelievable. I remember thinking in my head, like, this doesn't happen, like we live in this world where, babies at 39 weeks don't just die for no reason, like, a completely healthy baby.
And that's, I think so often connected to this and so many other things where you're just, yeah, that doesn't happen to us. That happens to other people, or that happens on, TV and the movies. And then obviously it does.
Yeah.
And with all of that, I mean, that had to have just rocked you for so long. I mean, there's so much process to that, and dealing with that, and like we were saying, it kind of turns everything upside down. And are there any other parts that you want to speak to with that, of services afterwards, of support?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, we it was really hard to wrap our minds around what was happening. You're just in such shock, the trauma of it all. It's all happening like really fast. So
yeah.
So that was, my appointment was maybe at 8 in the morning, and I think she was born around 3 o'clock later in the afternoon. So Dan was at work at the time. So I had to call him. Like the very next thing I had to do after I found out that my daughter had died was call my husband and tell him the worst news that I was ever going to say in my whole life, and he's just like at work. And it was kind of like people talk about this line of like before and after, like just still living in that world where our life hadn't been torn in two. And I just felt like, yeah, I did. And I was pacing around the room, like I would pick up the phone and put it down, and like I was like, I'm gonna give it to the nurse. I'm gonna have the nurse call. I'm like, no.
Well, now, yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, that's what went through my mind. Was like, really, like they made you make that call, or like they gave you the choice?
They just were literally like looking at me like, what do you want to do? Like, yeah, it was all up to me, Yeah, that's
had
how
to have been like a zombie.
I know. I was completely like out of my mind, but I do know that I said to them that I wanted to drive there because I didn't want to tell them on the phone, and they were kind of like,
yeah, no, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah. So, anyway, so eventually Dan got to the hospital, and like I said, so Abby was born around 3 by C-section, and so we had talked with a lot of the all kinds of people through the hospital, and we knew for sure that we wanted to see her and that we wanted to spend as time with her, like as much time as we could. We didn't know like what that meant or what that would be like, or it sounded scary. But so I think after she was born, they finally brought me around to the recovery room, and I remember asking Dan if he had seen her, and he said, yeah, she's beautiful. Because I felt I was really nervous about seeing her, like, what is she going to look like, and we had heard some people say that if you're nervous to see her, you could ask somebody to describe her to you.
Okay.
Is there all kinds of physical things going on with her? Like, I don't know, just to kind of, calm your expectations or something. I don't know. So,
because at that point we had zero information about what
happened.
Okay. And so, I mean, it was, gigantic question mark. And were they, just giving you space to spend time with her, or, it was like okay, and now this is happening, like next we're doing this, or like you didn't get anything?
Yeah, it was, I mean, I was still so out of it when we were in the recovery room, but so, I mean, once we decided to meet her, see her and hold her and everything. First of all, like, it was just this amazing moment of like, I mean, she literally was like perfect and beautiful, it just, you holding her and looking at her just like she's gonna like coo or cry or like move around. That was like the most beautiful and also the most heartbreaking thing, you're like, there's literally like nothing wrong with her. So how does she just die? Like, but yeah, so I'm kind of going in both directions, but so the time that we spent with her was such a gift. And, you hear these stories of women who have had stillbirths long ago, and they never got to see their babies. They would just whisk them away and sort of just pretend like that was that, and let's move on, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm so grateful that that's not the standard protocol these days.
Sure. And some of the feedback that I got around, preparing for this episode was, sort of the older way of doing it. They, just, poof, gone. And I can't even imagine that. I can't imagine, how much harder that makes the grief process.
No.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I to the credit of the Bryn Mawr Hospital, and which is where we delivered, they did a great job of when we had Abby, they gave us all the space that we needed to be with her. And even as going through the recovery process, they worked around us, worked around where we were at, in order to continue to take care of her, and didn't ask us to put her down at any time in order to take care of anything. They were very respectful, and it was a great gift that they gave us. That they catered to us more than I remember them doing in any of the previous births.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So I mean, obviously that stands out for both of you, that they did that and that they were sensitive to that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, clearly you have a huge personal stake in, this issue, this crisis. And so do you find it hard to work in that space now? Or is it more it's just a passion and a mission, and, you kind of deal with that?
The hard part, it's both. I'd say the answer is both, because the hard part is we know so many families who have very similar stories to us, and every story is so heartbreaking. Like the life that we're living, and that's the hard part, is kind of being on a journey with these families who are in heartache, but the blessing side of it is just that, I don't consider it hard to work in this space, because in a way, in a lot of ways, I feel like there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of how stillbirth and pregnancy loss families are cared for. And, this is another thing I love about the Star Legacy Foundation, is they talk about preventative stillbirth, and obviously some stillbirth is not preventable, but there are a lot of things that can be done to prevent this. And we see other developed countries making huge progress, way far ahead of us. So we see that example is out there, and we see that it's possible with what they're doing. But preventing families from having to walk this journey that's what's exciting. And I believe that's totally possible. And so in some way, it's also our way of staying connected to our daughter. This is, she's still part of our family. This is parenting her, and, being her mom and being her advocate looks very different than it does with our two living children,
Sure.
So this is kind of our way of honoring her and serving her,
Yeah. It made me think of, again, there's so many people that, once they're touched by something like this, then it becomes that, okay, this is either my way to pay it forward and, try to make sure nobody else goes through this. I always say with, every doctor, counselor, nurse, social worker, usually they're trying to save somebody that they couldn't save in their own lives a lot of times. So,
yeah.
Okay. And Dan, do you find that for you as well, in terms of, I mean, it's that balancing act of it's hard to work in that space and, the passion for it at the same time. I mean,
yeah, it's I resonate with what Kristen's saying. Like the difficult part is this: the people that you're connecting with are heartbroken.
yeah.
So it's like the hard part is every single time you connect with somebody, you're diving right back into the heartbreak that we just went through, and we're having to like experience it again and again and again.
Sure.
Which is like difficult, but it's also, I think Kristen said it well. It's like it also brings us back to that, like to Abby. It's there is a part of it, like it's difficult. There's a part of it. There's a part of me that wants to like quote unquote move on, but there's a big part of me that like I can't. I don't want to. I have no desire to move past this experience, and like, and it's like it feels like it's a blessing to be able to sit down and listen to somebody else, to acknowledge somebody else, because now 18 months later, where we feel in a lot of cases is alone. The early stages, you're surrounded by people.
Yeah.
The more farther you get removed from your loss, you feel alone because your loss is still there with you, but nobody else sees it.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, your life does progress. And so being able to lean in this way is a blessing, because we're also connecting with others who know full well this is our life now.
Yeah.
Well, and oh gosh, I mean, you both said that so beautifully. It made me think of I mean, just any loss. You hear a lot of people talk about, year one is awful in one way, year two is awful in another way. And, a lot of times year two, most everybody else has gone back to their lives and moved on. And a lot of the supports and the checking in is not there as much.
Yeah.
And, just a lot of times people let their guard down after year one, and then they get like rocked in year two a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I always say you've become a part of the crappiest club you never wanted to be a part of.
Yes.
You're in like a very select group, and you didn't select to be there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, man. So, Kristin, are you able to kind of speak to just stats around this off of Star Legacy Foundation and just kind of unpack how big is this issue?
Yeah. Most stillbirth moms I know will say that before they had a stillbirth, they had no idea what the stats are. And that is shocking to me, because they're
staggering.
Yeah, they're in the US, it's 1 in 160 pregnancies.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's 10 times more common than the rate of SIDS. Specifically, with SIDS, there's been a ton of research poured into SIDS over the past 30 years. And once they started realizing that the babies that were sleeping on their stomachs, a lot of them were dying from SIDS. Yeah, then we, started the Back at Best campaign. That's right. And we all, because we all slept on our stomachs, and now our kids all sleep on their backs. Now, that whole thing. And the SIDS rate was immediately cut in half.
Wow.
When that was instigated. That's such a simple thing. And I feel like with stillbirth, we're not even to the point where we can really say, it's this, all these kinds of things. We're getting there. I feel like some of that research is starting to come forward. But yeah, so that's 26,000 pregnancies a year in the U.S. and 72 families a day that suffer stillbirth. And stillbirth rates more than double for many minority populations.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And there's not a lot. Again, we're not to the point where we really understand why is. Yeah, what that's about. And one more stat that really also gets to me is that the U.S. has no national system to report and evaluate stillbirth.
Sorry, say that again.
The United States has no national system to report and evaluate stillbirth. So
okay, I was literally like, what?
How is that possible, right? Like we don't collectively, even state by state, the definition of stillbirth, it changes state by state. So when stillbirth, we're not understanding why it's happening collectively as a nation. So how can you remedy the situation when you're not even understanding why?
Yeah.
In so many cases. So, yeah.
Okay. And you were saying some other countries are further along in solving the issue than we are. I don't know if you're able to speak to what are some of the things that they're doing that we're not.
So we, I don't know the exact protocol on how, the systems that are in place, but we, in June, through Star Legacy Foundation, they run something called the Stillbirth Summit every other year, and they bring together the world's leading researchers, advocates, educators, and they kind of bring everybody together and just kind of say, what can we do? How can we join forces? And okay, you're an expert in this area and you really know a lot about that, and you guys are passionate about that, and what's our next steps moving forward? And they've seen a lot of progress because of these summits. But so this year, in the past June, we heard from Scotland's chief medical executive, Catherine Calderwood. And so she was tasked in Scotland to lower the nation's stillbirth rates by 15%. And so when she kind of came into office and had this, so she had a story from her early years of being an OB, of having 3 full-term stillbirths in one weekend, that she delivered, and it wrecked her. We saw that from our end too, like how hard this is, not just on our end, but on the medical provider side. Our doctors, our nurses, they took it to heart so much. And so it was already a passion for her, and so when she took that on, her colleagues, she said she'd sat around tables with colleagues and they all laughed at her. They scoffed at her and told her it can't be done, and I remember what they talked about was comparing it to traffic deaths. So they would look at the stats of traffic deaths, and they would just say, oh, well, that's just how it is. This many people die on the roads in accidents and because of this and blah, 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 and then we started doing seat belts, and then we started doing airbags, and then we started doing child seats and whatever, measuring this distance between the merging and whatever all those things are.
Sure.
And we saw the numbers decrease, drastically.
Yeah, significantly.
And so that was like the mentality of it. And so Scotland has sustained a 23, she's like, you're right, we didn't do 15%, we did 23%. They've sustained a 23% reduction in their stillbirth rate.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, the obvious next question is, why is there such a void? And I don't know if you're able to answer that. I'm sure you have your theories, but how is that possible? How is it possible that we don't even have a center, or that it seems like SIDS gets more, I guess, airplay, quote unquote?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think both of us, I'll let Kristin speak, and then I'll put a pause, and then you can choose to cut out my response because it might be a little bit politically fired. But
fire away, man. Yeah. I'd say if you don't have a right to be pissed, I don't know that anybody does. Right. So,
I mean, we have a very different healthcare system. So there are things from the top down that, just like, for example, Abby doesn't have a birth certificate. Okay. So I want to wave my hands and say, hey, I gave birth just like I did for my other 2 boys, but it was a slap in the face to us, in in the spring when we realized that the government wasn't recognizing that she was a child of ours that we gave birth to. And so starting from the top down, we don't have, I think that just impacts the way that our government, our culture really kind of sees stillbirth. And I'm kind of losing my.
Yeah. So you were saying just, the way that they view it, the top down way that they address the problem, it sounds like it needs some overhaul, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think a lot of it also revolves around the fact that just, the Star Legacy executive director says stillbirth is just, it's not sexy. It's not a hot button. It's like people don't want to talk about babies dying. Like they just don't. It's so uncomfortable. And I think that's part of the silence that we talk about, or the stigma surrounding stillbirth, is just there's silence. People don't want to talk about it. Like, this is our life. Like, and, we've chosen to kind of be open with our story, but so I know at the playground when, the random mom who's trying to just make small talk with me asks me how many kids I have, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. I'm like, I have
what answer do I give? Yeah.
Yeah. And then, oh, how old are they? And I'm like, oh, and she lives in heaven. And then it's like awkward, it's just like this huge awkward moment, change of subject.
It shuts down the conversation. And for those who we're communicating with, like we're okay with it. The recognition is like we're choosing what to say, depending on whether we want to continue having a conversation with the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if we say what's true, they shut down, and that's a problem.
Well, and I mean, obviously, just most people, it's sort of like the, how was your weekend? And people dealing with a terminal illness, when you ask them that, most people aren't expecting like the real true answer of like, yeah, I had a pretty crappy weekend. Yeah, this was awful. And, usually you're just expecting the like, flippant short answer. And so, yeah, I would imagine unless the person has experienced that or something, in that ballpark, they're not going to know how to deal with it. Or, obviously the people that are close to you and love you, they already know. So you don't have to keep explaining it to them.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So like to go to some of my thoughts, and I agree wholeheartedly with everything Kristin's saying. Is like, it's just an uncomfortable topic to talk about for most people. But, to go to why the void of research, why the void of focus. If I'm being honest, the piece that I struggle with, because I even struggle at emotionally, like as we share about our loss, culturally, we don't look at stillbirth as a loss of a baby in a lot of cases. It's a fetus. And even as like we watch documentaries, you become a little bit obsessed about these topics and seeing what other people are doing and researching. And even as these like quote unquote leading researchers, quote unquote, they are leading researchers, are talking about like whatever information, statistics that they find, they keep referring to our babies as fetuses. Until we stop looking at them as fetuses and looking at them as living beings, our children, I don't think that anybody's going to care as much about focusing on how to end stillbirth as much as they ever did with SIDS, because there's a baby in front of them that whether to care about.
And that makes sense. I can see that. Sure.
So that's like that. I get a little bit fiery about this, but that's one of those things. And I get fiery because I feel a little bit embarrassed in myself that even as I share with other people, part of my concern about whether I want to talk about Abby's death and the nature of it as a stillbirth is that insecurity of like, is the person across from me going to understand the depth of emotion and the depth of the sense of loss? Because from their perspective, well, you didn't get to meet her. You didn't, she didn't really ever live. there's that internal battle and internal dialogue that it's,
do I want to go there? Do I want to? Yeah.
Yeah. And quite honestly, I want to be offended by the person across from me for like diminishing the value of my daughter.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the obvious answer is no, they're not going to understand it unless you're at, a Star Legacy event or, something else like that. No, they're not going to understand. And yeah, so that's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down. And kind of dovetailing off of that, obviously during pregnancy, there's such a focus on, having a positive mental attitude and, minimizing stressors, however the heck you do that. I don't even know. It's like, well, you want to, decrease stress. Thanks. Great. Yeah. Why don't I just do that?
24/7.
Yeah. So how do you balance that with, trying to educate mothers and couples and families when, like you said, nobody wants to talk about babies dying?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a really scary thing. It's a cultural shift is what we're really after. It's baby steps here in this arena, and there's a lot of thought in this area where we can do much better with giving expectant moms and expectant families better information, more information. That's like ignorance is not bliss when it comes to pregnancy.
Yeah.
And so it's even just within the terminology that you get, when you're at your OB. We hear a lot about kick counts. We hear a lot about, knowing your baby's movement patterns. Why are we doing kick counts? Literally, it's to prevent stillbirth. That's one tool that we have, but we never
give the why.
Yeah, it's like we never really connect the dots, and just there's a lot of things that can be done. Like for us, there was one very simple thing that I had no idea about until I started researching a little bit more. But, you always hear that decreased fetal movement is obviously a sign for concern. But there's a lot of studies out there that say increased fetal movement is also a sign of concern. And, what I would wave my arms to every expectant mom and say, if you think there is a problem, do not wait 1 minute to call. A lot of times I know we lay around and we drink the sugary drinks and we lay on our left sides and we do all these things. And like Abby was gone in a few minutes. Like there's like all this stigma of like, I'm going to be the crazy mom when I call, and just like, I wish OBs would just sit in front of their patients, say, I'd rather have you call 1,000 times. Like, it's okay. Like just reassure moms in that way, so.
Well, I even in couples that I've worked with in counseling and doing couples counseling where they're expecting, just the difference in within, the couple, the two partners of, one being more anxious and more stressed out and the other one's like, oh, you're fine. It's nothing. It's no big deal. Stop thinking about it. And even running into issues there of, not wanting to be the crazy mom or, make waves or, read too much into it.
Right.
So you were saying just the connecting the dots of, why are we doing this? Why are we focusing on this? And yeah, even in with our two children, I don't remember ever hearing, obviously they drilled back as best into us and skin to skin and things like that. But I don't really remember ever hearing anything much about, stillbirths, the possibility of it, stats, like what to look for, nothing.
Yeah, there's, I wish I had thought about this graphic, but there, not to eat brie, cheese, all of these things of how to prevent, and in pregnancy, they're testing for all kinds of these crazy diseases, but when the stats for those things, the stats are so much lower. For stillbirth, we're talking 1 in 160, and why aren't we talking about that? And, and I think that's usually the thing is like, from the OB community is like, we don't want to scare our patients. Like, of course, we don't want, and that's not the goal, but like giving somebody knowledge and giving them the full information that they're going to use to protect their baby is best.
Be vital. Yeah. I mean,
sure,
yeah. So, I mean, again, this is a whole other, I mean, we could probably spend like days. I'm not gonna, I always say I'm not running like a Joe Rogan experience here where we're just going to go on for hours, but there's so many issues that, are a result of stillbirth and pregnancy loss for the mother, for the couple, the family. What do you see as some of the main ones, I guess? I mean, obviously just the crushing sadness and the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But are there other ones off of that, or things you would try to, sort of prepare people for?
Sure. Well, I think, when I think about this, it's kind of, when I was 16, my grandma's died, and that was my idea of grief. My idea of grief. It's, again, it's like, I feel like we need to have a cultural shift in terms of how we think about loss and grief.
Mm-hmm.
And even just pain, dealing with pain, and so we are thrown into this world of crazy grief. And, before I thought grief was, okay, somebody has something really awful in their life, somebody died or whatever. And then you just work on it and you get better and better and better and better and better. And then you're all better.
Yeah.
That's what I thought grief was, before. And now I would never say that to somebody. I that's not what grief is. Grief is just a reflection of the love that you have for that person that that you have the grief for. And so I think that's a huge part of just normalizing grief. When you're early on in our grief, we did so much work in just trying to understand what grief is, that I'm not actually losing my mind. Grief makes you forgetful. You can't even think of, I could hardly put a sentence together early on because I couldn't think of the words. My brain was too tired from grieving and spending so much emotional energy, doing this and blah, blah, blah. Early on in those days, deciding if we were having a funeral or if we were going to cremate or not, or which urn we were picking out. I mean, those are things no parent should ever have to think about. And obviously I couldn't make a sentence because I was consumed by all those things. So just, I think for stillbirth families and really anybody suffering grief, normalizing grief for people to understand what is grief. It's a gift to be able to, to go through a grief, having a healthy understanding of what it is.
Mm. And yeah, I mean, it made me think of, traumatic brain injury or a, post-concussion syndrome where, your brain has slammed up against your skull. The same kind of idea of I think the thing we keep saying is just so overwhelmed with emotion and grief and sadness. Dan, I want to give you an opportunity. Same question. I mean, are there other things that you would speak to of major issues that you've seen? I imagine from the dad husband perspective, you've got to have something.
Yeah, no, in terms of issues, the two things that I've recognized in myself and actually in others that I've gotten to connect with is, one, deferred grief, that just, you go into action mode and we feel we gotta have everything together, but at some point the world comes crashing down.
Yeah, and it'll catch up with you.
Yeah, for me it was 6 months after that I just started becoming like non-functional, and I just couldn't deal with anything. And the byproduct of all of it was like, even to this day, struggling with anxiety. Like anxiety, we have two boys that are with us. Like we had no idea what happened to our daughter until it was too late.
Yeah.
What, like, we see potential like threats, we see potential issues like all around us, and like having to just deal with the anxiety that I didn't deal with like beforehand is like a bit overwhelming at times. You know, like I find like every once in a while I find, you know, Kristin, I involuntarily I just find myself doing like deep breathing. And Kristin will ask like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing. I'm just
I'm just breathing.
Everything and nothing." You know, I'm like, I just realized like I'd start having a panic attack. You know, just trying to think. And the ability, like there's been, you know, I've appreciated with my company, I have a great relationship with my colleagues and the owners, my bosses, you know, but I've had to share with them the struggle of focusing.
Yeah.
Just being able to focus on a task, being able to make a decision. Like I remember like early on, there was a lot of things that, again, beyond just having to plan a funeral and pick an urn, and like a lot of decisions about our house, about stuff, about, you know, like having to travel, making arrangements for the boys. And it got to a point where I had to like come to terms with the fact I'm incapable of making decisions right now. Yeah. I'm just incapable of it. And I've had to be like, I had to become like, I started yelling at people to say, like, stop asking me anything. Just make a decision and let it happen. Like, I just don't care. You know, but dealing with those pieces are like, there's so much like normal function that just comes to an end. Yeah. And it's still, we're 18 months. We just passed 18 months since losing Abby. And it's still like, I can speak for myself, but I think for both of us, plagues us on a daily basis, the like ongoing impact of grief, of the loss, of like all the peripheral pieces. The anxiety hasn't diminished.
Anger.
Yeah, anger. Yeah. I've never been one for a short fuse. It's gotten shorter.
I could see where that could happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the very least, like it comes with the self-awareness. So I'm at least like, I apologize for the people for having a fuse, but I can't stop it.
Well, and two things about that. I mean, one, the question real briefly, you were saying, you know, the wave hit you like 6 months after. Did you see that as a function of being the dad and the husband and kind of having to keep things running and focusing on the logistics, and then you were just so exhausted and worn down that it finally caught up to you?
Yeah. And it surprised me how deep it was. It didn't surprise me. I knew it was going to come. Yeah. Just because, again, you look around. I have kids. I have a wife who's just destroyed. I have a mortgage. I have electric. I have 2 cars that I have to pay for. And I'm like, so you go back to work and you come home and you do all the dishes and the laundry and the cleaning and putting the kids to bed and waking them up. Like, and you like, there's some level of like normalcy, and I found for myself, I leaned into the normalcy of it.
Sure. Yeah. It's something you could control.
Yeah. And that's exactly true. But you know, it did end up getting to a point where you can only run at that pace for so long, and you know, the loss didn't go anywhere. Yeah.
Well, and it somewhat leads me into my next question. You know, you touched on the anger, and I think that can be all consuming as well, and it just kind of like goes all over the place. Like angry at myself, angry at God, angry at you, angry at, you know, anything and everyone. You know, we as a society, I think we are making a shift towards a more trauma focused and trauma informed understanding. And starting to become more aware of like, oh, this is a big deal. This is going to impact us. But for so many people that they haven't experienced it and they don't understand it, you get that reaction of like, well, they weren't really, they weren't really alive. So why are you still so busted up about it? I'm sure you got just a barrage of stupid things said to you. How do you, I don't know if you want to respond to any of those now that you have the mic, or, but how do you deal with that? You're listening to OTC episode 70 with Dan and Kristin Naylor of the Remember Shop. We'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor.
Would you like to talk to a counselor but can't find the time? Would you rather talk to someone from the comfort of your own home? If so, Parenting and Family Solutions is here to help. We now offer teletherapy to all clients who reside in the state of Pennsylvania. Using our secure portal, you can have a video session with your counselor using a laptop, desktop computer, or smartphone. Visit our website to learn more at www.parentfamilysolutions.com or give us a call at 717-602-5560 to see if teletherapy might be a good fit for you. Let us help you build a stronger family and a healthier you.
I don't know if you want to respond to any of those now that you have the mic, or, but how do you deal with that?
As a griever, we were far from perfect, but we tried to have a lot of grace for people that were well-meaning, but said things that were still hurtful. So, we're kind of like going through this, you go through this, like, the hopefully most terrible chapter of your life. And then you're also looking at other people as they're responding to us, and they're so uncomfortable with our pain that like, they just want to see us smile. So maybe they tell us a joke and they want us to laugh, and or they talk about like the things that they think we should be grateful for, like, oh, well, you still have your boys, or I know that that's usually never ill-intended, but it completely negates the pain that we're feeling. Like, we didn't forget to be grateful for our boys. That's not the problem, you know?
Thank you for reminding me.
And now I feel bad. Like, was I ungrateful for them or something? Or I don't know. It's like
confusing mind job where you're like, great, now I feel guilty. Now I feel angry about being angry. And, it's like just ripple effects.
Yes. But I don't know. So there was a lot of grace for people that were well-intended. And, and we've taken to just kind of gently, when there was an opportunity, trying to educate people that's not helpful.
Don't say that. Don't do that.
In some kind of way when there was an opportunity to do that. But, it was even harder to experience the people that just weren't able to come and say anything at all, and I understand that, like, it's so uncomfortable and I don't know what to say and everything, but, in those lowest moments of our lives, like you feel abandoned completely. And so that was really, really hard to go through.
Yeah. In a lot of it, again, I think Kristin said it well, that it's whether because you just want to be gracious or you just don't want to get into a fight in the midst of what we're going
grieving
through.
Your daughter,
like you take the admittedly like stupid comments that people make, that best of intended but stupid comments, and you brush them off. You get frustrated, and admittedly, on more than a couple of occasions, as we're finishing out our day, we have a bitch session with each other about all the stupid things people said that day. And then you feel better afterwards, at least a little bit. Yeah. But a lot of it has been like taking every opportunity to educate, and quite honestly, like they're on there's been more than a handful of occasions where, our experience has informed us on how to support somebody else.
For sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you definitely got like a PhD crash course in grief counseling. And yeah, I what I've always heard said, and I've seen in my life is, it kind of goes both ways. Like some people that you really thought were gonna be there and show up for you don't,
right.
And people that you never thought would show up are like suddenly there and really supportive and understanding, and it's kind of surprising both ways a lot of times.
Yeah.
And that I think also is something people don't realize is like even the hurt that comes off of that, the damage that can do also.
Yeah. That was like when I talked about normalizing grief, like those secondary losses, it wasn't just Abby. It was like, we felt like for maybe a good year, we were literally just hemorrhaging like losses. Like I lost my job. I lost, like loss after loss after loss after loss.
Yeah.
And what, as you were talking, what came to mind is, and hopefully this doesn't come across as me making a stupid comment, but the idea of, you had each other, in single parent situations or things like that, it, that idea of like, where do you go, and I think for couples and families having to get really good at, sort of the tag team wrestling match and tagging each other in or out and communicating that need of like, hey, today is not my day. I need you to step up to the plate or,
Yeah. And that's like, it's funny. We've talked a fair amount because, we've done a couple of sessions, whether you're familiar with it or any of the listeners are familiar with it, like Grief Share.
Yeah.
Which is, it had been fantastic for us. And, it's not that it's for anybody who's lost somebody in their life, not just children. But
our Grief Share group was composed like probably 90% of widows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting points of like illumination for us and even among the group and listening to them. And, what I appreciated again, most was we had a shared experience of loss and we understood each other and what we were going through. But they talked about how difficult it was to go home to an empty house and like not have anybody to grieve with, not have anybody to cry with. As we were sitting there and we shared openly because we formed great relationships. But I'm like, more days than not, the hardest part was to come home recognizing I couldn't just grieve the way that I wanted to grieve. That
you didn't have the space.
That needed me to be functional, kids that needed to be functional. Like the hardest part was actually the fact that we both were at home and it wasn't really okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so much our griefs were just crashing into each other,
So
it took so long for us to be able to, we're still learning like how to give space for him to do his grief his way. And that you're, it's almost like insulting that before I really understood that was his way of grieving,
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's something I find so often is we'll get into grief fights over, you're not allowed to feel that, or you're not allowed to grieve that way. That's wrong. And you have to do it my way, or you have to feel what I'm feeling. And I think people get that idea of being understood and being heard confused with like, you have to express it the same way I do.
Yeah.
And Dan, I don't know if you're able to speak to, any of the, fathers or husbands out there. Is there any advice that you would give of like struggling with their own grief, but also trying to support?
The only thing I can say on, at least in the fathers that I've come to know, and as one myself, and husbands, the piece that we have a hardest time accepting is our own vulnerability. This is the worst possible time to take the man up approach.
Okay.
It's like just pull your bootstraps up and muscle on.
Suck it up, buttercup. Yeah.
This is not the muscle on. This is not the suck it up period. All you're doing is hurting yourself and hurting your family, and quite honestly, potentially, if you let it go, destroying your family, because you think that you're bottling it up and you're staying strong, but what you need to realize and look around is that the person across from you that's grieving needs you to be there, needs to be present and vulnerable, and even if it's just being willing to say, I can't go there, we'll be here with you, I'm right there with you, but I just can't, I don't know how to communicate what I'm going through.
Wow.
May at times be enough for them to recognize you are not heartless, you are struggling. Because that was a reality for us. There was points at which Kristin turned to me. She's like, "Do you just not feel anything?
Are you just over it?
Yeah. Are you a robot? Are you dead inside? Are you? Yeah.
And reality was, I'm like, all I'm trying to do is stuff down the destroyed heart that's inside of me, so I can keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's the piece of advice that I can give, because for guys, is that we've grown up. Most of us have grown up being told that it's not okay to have emotions, that to be vulnerable, to be sensitive, to cry. I've cried in front of more people over the last 18 months than I have probably in my entire life.
Sure.
And every single one of them have been okay with it. And quite honestly, most of the relationships have gotten stronger because of the honesty.
Well, and oh man, thank you so much for saying that. I mean, I think we could just repeat that so many times in so many ways. Because I imagine a lot of the listeners out there are connecting with that. And I love the way that you put that, with that idea of like potentially destroying a marriage or a family, or kind of like we were saying about just the ripple effects of the grief and the loss. That's something that I've seen as a counselor is, like that the loss of the child was the first one. And then a lot of times, it can take out the rest of the family.
The other thought that occurred to me was like, thinking through the group experiences that we've had. We've attended like weekend retreats, and we've done.
We're grief nerds, pretty much.
We're doing the work.
Grief junkies. Okay.
There was one married couple that sticks out in my mind from this past summer. Who had lost their son, I think it was probably 5 years before. At this retreat was the first, I think the first experience that the father had at a, like, in the presence of others who had grieved. And his wife had shared that was the first time that he actually opened up. Like, he was like falling apart. He was just heartbroken. This is the first time 5 years later that he had opened up. And I have to attribute it to the fact that he was willing to step out and attend this group. So to that point, like, another thing to answer your question that you're asking me is like, men, your wife's maybe going to a group and you think, okay, that's great that they have to go to it. You go too. It should be like any group, grief group, any shared grief experience is this grief experience for both of you guys to do together. It's not for your wife to do alone.
And I think you answered the question I was about to ask. So awesome job, Dan. I was going to ask Kristin, would you say, like, everybody should go to a grief group? I mean, would you go that far?
I think that everybody needs to find some way of processing it. So I know that grief group sounds probably very scary to a lot of people, but I think and the first time we tried was Grief Share, and it was 6 weeks maybe after Abby died, and they recommend they say don't just do like a first date. I think they try to get you to come 3 times, before you decide that you're going to quit. And what's another thing that's really great about Grief Share is the cost of it is you pay like $16 for the workbook or something, $20 or whatever. And so we were like, okay, $20. If we never go back, who cares? It's not.
Yeah. You can use the workbook at home.
Yeah. And so, but I can't imagine how people get through this without processing in some way, if it's not a group. I mean, these days online, like I didn't understand, but there's a huge presence just online. These days you can join all kinds of Facebook groups, for this kind of loss, that kind of loss, and somebody's always there 24 hours a day. And it's a lot of times it's anonymous people, and you can, you can put your heartache out there. And I've gotten a lot of encouragement that way, just by, because there are people that understand what we're going through, and it's sort of this weirdly safe place to grieve. I don't think it's not a replacement for group or anything like that, or counseling or whatever. It's just one, it's another stick in the bucket as far as like, kind of aiming at your healing from different perspectives or whatever. But I think processing in some ways definitely vital.
Yeah, and obviously as a counselor, I would definitely support that. I always say I wish I could get everyone to go to a group of some sort, but so many people, that is like the absolute last thing that they want to do, because it's, the idea of like being vulnerable with one individual counselor is bad enough. The idea of being in a group a lot of times is like, I would rather have a root canal with like no painkiller. But at the same time, usually as the therapist, I'm trying to, be the cheerleader for like, you will get so much out of it. There's so much support and so much perspective. And
I know.
Yeah.
We had a friend early on, a counselor friend told us that, you'll get a lot out of individual counseling and you'll get a lot different stuff out of group. And I remember thinking like, what? What does that even mean or whatever? It's totally true. We did individual counseling as well. Together we did it, but and it was very different. But especially with the group, there's so much solidarity in grief. And with our grief group, it didn't matter that they were widows and we had lost a child, like just because of the grief, like there was so much commonality, and they like became our people, soon enough we were like ready, so excited for Monday, because it became a place for our grief to just
have a place
there. Everywhere else I'm at Burger King or Chick-fil-A with the kids or whatever, paranoid that the moms are going to ask me how many kids I have, like that's how I live, like every day, everywhere I go. And then I go to grief group and it's not like that anymore. All of a sudden I'm around these people that just get it.
Yeah. They understand. So shifting to what services are available, whether that's within Star Legacy Foundation or, obviously we've talked a good bit about Grief Share, but what services are available today and where would you point people?
Specifically for stillbirth? So we've talked about Grief Share. Another organization that I love is called Hope Mommies. It's a Christian-based organization that has online support, online Bible studies. They put out just some resources. And then I actually attended a retreat down in Texas. And, it was all I could do to get on a plane and not have a panic attack to get all the way down.
Yeah. Just drug me up on this end and somebody pick me up on the other.
Wake me up when I'm there. They are probably one of the coolest, most amazing grief resource ministries that I've ever come across. That weekend was just, it changed so much about the trajectory of my grief, not just because of what I got there, but because of the relationships that were there. The same thing.
That's, man, Texas. Yeah. That's a pretty big leap of faith. I mean, and I would imagine also for you, Dan, of, having to, pick up the slack of Kristin not being there while she was away, but also just the like, okay, I'm putting my wife on a plane, and I really hope this goes well.
Oh yeah. It's like the debriefs at the end of the night, like kind of looking forward to, but not looking forward to, like as if it's not going well.
Yeah, you're not in Texas.
Yeah. So no, I was really encouraged. Like there was a number of things that kind of for that trip specifically kind of came together, and it just made it. Again, you read the signs and pray about it, and you have faith that it plays out. And a couple of things kind of came together really well. We had faith that it was gonna be a good experience, but it is anxiety inducing on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another organization that we've loved is called While We're Waiting. So they focus on any kind of child loss, and they offer similar weekend retreats for couples that have experienced child loss at any stage, and they provide them at no cost, which is amazing. But similar type of thing where we got a lot out of the weekend, but also the relationships that we gained there have been really impactful along our grief journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then Star Legacy Foundation, they has online support groups. So all kinds of different groups. There's a perinatal loss, pregnancy after loss, parenting after loss, grandparent support group, dad's discussion group, infant death group. There might be one or two more. Yeah. And they're led by, qualified, compassionate individuals, and people just jump on an online call and easy peasy.
Nice. And so, I mean, we've been talking a bit about what needs to be in place. I mean, we could probably just put that under like research, funding, education, but any specifics you would like, okay, somebody needs to write some senators and some strongly worded letters and get out there and, like take action. What would you say needs to be put in place, and how do people take action?
So, I guess for our chapter here in Philadelphia of the Star Legacy Foundation, two of the projects that we're working on for 2020 would be the Stillbirth tax credit. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 5 states in the U.S. that offer stillbirth families a one-time tax credit in the year that their child was born. So obviously it's not everything, but to stillbirth parents, it's a gift. It's a gift. We did not buy diapers and formula and wipes. We paid for a funeral and an urn and cremation and counseling and babysitters so we could go in the car and cry together, And so it's something, but more than that, it's a validation that our child lived, not just died. So that's something that we're working on here in Pennsylvania. And so some of the other states are kind of moving, some of the other groups are also moving in that direction. Another big initiative that we have with the Star Legacy Foundation is called Pregnancy Research Project. So essentially, researchers often have to compile their own database of individuals if they're trying to study anything with pregnancy loss, but also other issues surrounding pregnancy. And so you can imagine that if they're studying African-American women between the ages of 25 and 35 who have had a stillbirth, how difficult it is for them to gather their own people willing to participate in their studies. That takes years and years and years. And so Star Legacy Foundation, through this pregnancy research project, is essentially trying to be that database. They partnered partnered with the University of Michigan, and everything is stored behind the firewalls and whatever all those technical things are that I don't really understand.
The magic, yes.
Yeah.
It's like Hogwarts.
Yes, it's very whatever. But so essentially, any woman that's been pregnant in the past 5 years, pregnancy lasting more than 12 weeks, or any woman that's ever had a stillbirth ever can participate in this survey. And so
you're saying anything past 12 weeks?
Yeah, any woman that's had
at any point in history.
Any woman that's been pregnant that's lasted more than 5 weeks in the past. 12
weeks in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Aha. Yes. I'm very glad we clarified.
Longer than 12 weeks in the past 5 years.
Okay.
Or any woman that's ever had a stillbirth.
Wow. That's huge.
And they estimate that for some of these projects, this is going to speed up research by 10 to 20 years.
Okay. Man.
So it's big.
Yeah. And I did want to highlight, just so crazy huge, the like you were saying, just the numbers that you're talking about and the lack of numbers that we're not able to talk about. And I always throw into the show notes, links and things like that. So any listeners can be sure to go to the website and get that. So if you fall into that demographic, and please, do what it takes to connect with them and be heard, be part of the research, so that we can make some huge steps in this.
Thank you.
So in addition to all that you've been through and all that you all are doing, as if that wasn't enough, you also started another project. Tell me about that. What is that?
So we started an Etsy shop, and it's called the Remember Shop, or our little online store. And I assume everybody knows what Etsy is, but we're crafty. So I guess grief and craftiness, being creative, go together. And it's been so the idea came from, we call it glowing custom remembrance orbs. So it's a big glowing orb that's personalized, and it can sit as a reminder of somebody who's missing. So when we celebrated Abby's birthday this past July, it was really important to us that other people remembered Abby, but also that we helped remember other babies who aren't here. And so we had 100 babies, and we wrote their names on these little glowing orbs, and we lit a tea light inside and kind of made this display that was part of Abby's birthday. And it was this really, really beautiful way of honoring all these little lives. And that's kind of where the idea was born. We didn't,
quite honestly, we knew it was good. It was special to us. We knew it was going to be special to everybody who, asked, shared the names of their children. We didn't really realize how much it was going to resonate with everybody.
Yeah. Well, as you're talking about it, I'm getting worked up, I'm starting to tear up hearing about it. So gosh. So, what has it grown into?
So we kind of that was a very rough draft version of what it has become, I guess. It's, we got, so basically the bulk of what we sell is, and it's an ornament, and it's lined with tissue paper inside and coated with Mod Podge, and the name is printed. So, and each orb comes with a timer tea light. So it comes on for 6 hours, it stays on for 6 hours, and then it goes off for 18 hours. So the other idea with this is, for us, it was really hard to go to bed at night. So it was the distractions of the day were gone. It's just you and your
crappy thoughts.
Yes. And it's like, so these orbs kind of made their way over to Abby's little shelf in our room. And at night when we were going to bed, these lights started coming on her shelf. And it was almost like, oh, it's like her light. Her light is still there, and that's how we feel. And I know there's a lot of grievers feel like that, like nighttime is really hard. And so that is the idea of behind these glowing orbs. So, I've heard people say like, oh, I know mine comes on at 5 minutes before 5:00 p.m. And the other night I stayed there just waiting for it to come on. And, and it's just like, this really neat reminder that their person's light is not extinguished.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you said that, because I follow you all on Instagram and follow the Remember Shop. And I remember distinctly seeing that comment of somebody waiting, they were like in their bedroom and they were supposed to go downstairs, and they noticed the time and were like, and I specifically stayed and just waited.
I love it.
Yeah. It's like, it's been meaningful for us. It's been a good outlet, again, as an avenue through which we feel like we can bless other people. But I didn't expect it, the responses back to be so meaningful. I figured I'd appreciate getting the feedback from those who have bought them, but I find myself getting choked up just like knowing that like what we've been able to do with this little gesture means so much to them.
Yeah.
And so it's been a huge blessing.
Well, and I wanted to just share from, I know you all had posted a quote today, and I thought it fit so perfectly, knowing that we were going to talk and talk about what you all do with the Remember Shop. You posted the Ernest Hemingway, we are all broken and that's how the light gets in. And that idea of the light getting in, but also specific to the orbs, the light getting out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just like you were saying, that idea of like, oh, Abby's light is still there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess in terms of the light getting in and the light also coming out, what have you seen come out of this, of Abby and Star Legacy and the Remember Shop? What ways has the light gotten in and gotten out?
One way, I'm sure Kristin has some thoughts, but one way that it's gotten both in and out, quite honestly, John, it's having opportunities like this to talk, to share. We've been blessed that we've gotten connected with the hospital network that we delivered all three of our children at, and we've gotten opportunities. They've asked us to come in and speak on bereavement care, to help that, beyond our efforts to try to reduce the number of losses, at the very least, the ability for those who are caring for those who lose the next children, the ability to speak into their experiences and hopefully provide a better pathway through the grief process, through the loss. Okay. It's like given us some sense of like joy, of purpose, of value in our loss. There's no way to like, there's no way I'd ever put a dotted line of like, this is why. I never will provide an avenue, but we can make, it's like lemonade out of lemons. And this is one of those that we're hopefully blessing other people's lives by our own experience. And we've been blessed to have been given a platform to be able to do that.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I have a hard time because we live in this culture of like, we want to find the silver lining, like we want to make it all okay in the end. And I don't want to give the impression that it is or that it's not, like, because because we're finding our way in it. You know, we're definitely not where we were, 6 months ago or a year ago. And I can say that I'm really proud of the progress that we've made, and that the way that we've journeyed through this together, Dan and I as a couple, and with our boys. But we're not okay. Like we're not healed. I mean, that makes sense. Like I don't want to, so, but like, I remember people early on in my grief, like talking about the pain will lessen, or the light will return, or the color will return to your life, and I just remember like hearing people say that and just like totally scoffing. Like it's like, that's a joke. Like it can never,
how could that ever happen?
And now I think, okay, maybe.
Well, and I think we heard people say similar things, I think, and I don't know if you can attest to this. When you have a second child, that idea of, oh, well, how could you ever love a second child as much as you love the first one? And they're like, it just happens. Like, I don't know how to explain it to you. It just does.
Yes.
Is that kind of similar?
Yes. Like you can't understand, before that, you just can't understand how you can love two children the same, or differently, but the same, and like this is no journey that anyone would ever choose. I wouldn't wish on anyone, and we wouldn't have ever known how to plan for, or how to think of it before, but we're finding our way, and we are walking with much more lightness and much more hope and much more, expectation of good things in the future. And, and that, we're not leaving Abby behind. She's always part of our life, and that looks different and awkward and whatever in all kinds of ways, but we don't have to leave. It's not about moving on. It's not about leaving her behind. She's part of us, and that and we're okay with that. Like onward,
Yeah. To say like, I share a little very personal anecdote.
Yeah.
In our own house, I actually, like, my favorite memories through the last 18 months, related to like, do we see the light? For Kristin, like she, John, she was a professional ballerina for years. Like her life, for most of her life, dance has been a central part of who she's been. I saw light coming back probably 8 or 9 months after, when I saw my wife starting to dance again in our house. That's the dancing. I still remember, I'm going to get choked up about it, because I still remember it was probably a week after the first time I had seen her. Just, we all, like, you're walking around, you start whistling something, you start singing something. My wife starts dancing. And I remember somebody asking me how she's doing. And that was like the first thought that I had. It was like, it's unbelievable to realize. And like, I see a glimmer of light. Like, even at that moment, it was like barely a glimmer. But like, I got to share that moment of like, I walked into the room and I saw my wife dancing.
Wow.
Like, and it was a really special. I don't even know if I shared it with Kristin before, but it was a really special moment, and it's still like,
that's beautiful.
Moments of the last 18 months.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for being willing and being vulnerable enough to share that. And I think to speaking to the listeners, that idea of it's like you said, those little glimmers, it kind of starts off as that, and it can grow if you do the work and if you let it. I would say, if kind of going back to what you were saying, Dan, if you're just trying to soldier on, it's not. It's gonna either take longer, or it's actually gonna get worse, not better.
Yeah.
Hmm. So, yeah, it made me think of you were saying about the silver lining, and it made me think of the in the last I think 3 years, I think the concept of kintsukuroi had become very popularized in American culture. Some of that, I think, off of the TV show The Man in the High Castle, but the idea of like taking broken pottery and fixing it and fusing it with gold lining, and that idea of like we want things to be better, and we want it to be better now, and we want that silver lining, and like you said, it's not always like that. That scar will always be there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing about that is like, we like to think about the beauty and that's the whole point of the beauty, that all those broken pieces and the gold that's holding them together, but it's still broken,
Yeah. It had to break to get that way.
Yeah. And the painful process of that, but
sure.
Yeah, but the beauty of it as well. Both.
Well, and also just some of the amazing strength that comes through that. And I know that that's got to sound so weird, but that idea of like you never know how much you can handle or how far you can be pushed until you have something like this hit you. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would rephrase it as like, you never knew how far you did not want to get pushed.
Sure. Yes.
You don't have a choice. I know from the outside that's what it looks like, or that maybe that's what it looks like, when people see us. But
sure. Yeah. Like, I don't feel very strong.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like that from this side.
No.
Well, and I guess what I mean is, strength at this point, I guess I would say, or growing strength.
Yeah.
No, I do fully agree with. I mean, like it's the trials that you like. I never wanted to figure out the path through this journey, for this journey. You know what I mean? Like I never wanted to walk this path. Never. Yeah. I don't want anybody to, but and one of those pieces you're standing on the front side. I'm like, I don't even know where to begin. To take that next step and the next step and the next step. And, as you go, you realize like whether I like it or not, I have to.
Yeah.
Whether I like it or not, I have to take that next step. And then, I forget, it's always those like fleeting memories of like great lines from movies that once like escaping me right now, but it is true. And like the hardest part is finding that next step, but you take it, you realize you don't think that you have any of the strength until you realize like I have no choice but to have strength. There is no choice.
Yeah. Wow, man. Thank you guys so much just for taking this time to, like I said, be vulnerable and share your story. I know this can't be easy, and like you said, it's not something you ever wanted to go through, and now you have me or the Huffington Post or different things like hitting you up for like, please tell your story.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, we're really grateful for the chance to share and tell our story. It means a lot. So thank you, John.
Sure. Yeah. Any small part I can do to get your story out there, and if it helps other people, I mean that's I always say that's what the On the Couch podcast is all about. Is just if it helps one person, then great, it's worth it.
Exactly. That's what we're hoping for too. Yep.
Yeah. So in the next year, 2020, are there? You mentioned the 2 initiatives with Star Legacy. Are there other things you all have a hand in? Not that you need to take on other projects. You got enough, but
in a short answer, no.
Okay.
It's like we're just, I guess, a side partner to grief is like the self-care, which is
yes. Thank you.
word in our society, but like we're really learning self-care, and sometimes that means like just staying home on a Friday night, or sometimes that means actually trying to get it together to go out just because that's the right thing or whatever. So we're tapped out. We know that we're pretty much at our max. So
and I'm so glad that you know that, because so many people don't. They just try to take on more and more and more, and they burn themselves out, you know. And
I get that. And that's like just how our culture is, you know. We like exist in that busyness. So yeah, it's not easy. And the self-care it's hard, it's selfish, it's, you know, I don't know.
Sure.
Weird. But
so just can you give URLs, like where can people find Star Legacy? Where can they find the Remember Shop?
You want us to send it to you as like links, or do you want us to give them to you now?
Which would you prefer? I mean, I think if it's like 5 minutes of you listing out, different handles and URLs, no, thank you. But if you got two quick ones, we can plug that in.
Yeah, Star Legacy Foundation is just starlegacyfoundation.org. Okay. And if you want to find our little shop at Etsy, it's just the Remember Shop.
Okay. And anybody in the Philly area, are there events coming up with Star Legacy, or that you all will be at for the Remember Shop?
Yeah, so we have our big event for Star Legacy in the Philadelphia area will be November 8th, and we're holding an event called Dancing with the Philadelphia Stars. Very exciting, down in media.
Nice.
So the stars will be different medical providers from our region paired with professional ballet and ballroom dancers.
Wow, that's cool.
Yes, maybe a funny combo, but it's going to be an uplifting, positive night, just kind of talking about some of the successes that Star Legacy has had with our research and education programs, and just trying to get the word out there about what we're doing. So we have our little Facebook page for our Philadelphia group, so you can keep your eyes open for that.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to even walk with you in this small 2-hour section of your journey. And you all are doing amazing things. So I look forward to staying in touch and kind of keeping an ear out for what you all do in the years to come. So thanks.
Thank you, John.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, take care. There you have it, OTC listeners. Another episode done. Thank you for stopping by the podcast. Next episode will be OTC episode 71, where I'll be sitting down with Melissa Souter to focus on emotional wellness for women who are struggling with reproductive issues. Take care.